Hey everyone, Tactics here with another advanced plus 20 guide and walkthrough where in this video I'll be covering a Tyrannical timed Shadowmoon burial grounds, including how we handled each boss and trash pull, some potential routing variations you could use, and just other tips and tricks that will help you to time high keys. Similar videos just like this one for a lot of the other Dragonflight Season 1 dungeons over on my channel and linked in the description below, with the last couple coming out very soon, so be sure you subscribe to the channel to be notified when those get posted. Otherwise, let's just get into the run itself here on 1.25 times speed, and right off the top here we do Shroud this 3-pack. This 3-pack in general kind of feels a little bad to play because like obviously everyone's coming to dungeon, you have all your cooldowns, so really ideally you want to do a bigger, potentially more dangerous pull right off the top here. So we shroud 3, run left, and we have this void spawn with all these spirits and the loyalist here, and we come in and we nuke this pack. Now on fortified week there is certainly an argument to bloodlust this specific pull. However, getting into higher fortified, this first boss can get a little spooky now with the damage output it has, so it's kind of up in the air on what you're going to do in higher keys. Totally fine to bloodlust this fort pull on a fortified week. On a tyrannical week, you definitely would want to lust the boss though, so potentially a little split there on where you put your first lust. But you just want to be careful of these swirlies. These are stoppable, the cries of anguish. Otherwise, as you can tell, the AoE pulse is not a big deal here, but really the big thing is these void eruptions. The purple on purple on purple. Of course, now we have thundering. Impossible to see. I believe I do end up stepping into one right after rage. Yeah, so that's what happened there. And what happens here is we actually snap this pack onto the ground. So that's something that happens as well. So this pack down here, you can snap up relatively easily. So what happens here is we pull it to the ground because we're directly above it and use an AoE ability, that kind of thing. That'll snap it up. But what you can do also, if you look here, is you can just get line of sight on it, tap it, and then back up here, and they'll snap up as well. So you can potentially add that to this first pull as well. Just as a tank, you want to be careful of the, where is it? Let me fast forward a bit to where we're actually pulling these guys. There we are. For the skitterlings, these guys also snap, so you can just literally just pull them and go right down here and they'll snap down. You don't need to kill them up there. They'll snap relatively easily. And then you actually get to this pack I was talking about. So the problem here as a tank, at least, there's 3 of these ritual bones guys, and they have void slash, which is a pretty nasty tank buster. Notably though, this tank buster is backsteppable. So the micro-kiting, backstepping, however you want to call it, you can just back up and take a no damage from this ability. It's also stoppable. The cast is quite quick, as you can see there, so you may not be able to get the stop in time, but you can backstep, you can stop it, so you have some counterplay there. You definitely, if you have like 2 of these going off back to back, could be in for a pretty rough time, especially on fortified weeks as a tank. So you definitely want to be either mitigating this with a big CD, backstepping it to avoid it entirely, or stopping it. One of those 3 things. On the Shadow Mender, they kind of just bolt randomly, but the big thing you want to stop there is the actual Shadow Mend, the heal. If that goes off, that's an instant big heal on the mob. Makes the pack just last way longer. See here, backstepping. Missed the backstep on that one, but backstep the one previous. If both of those had gone off on me, I would have been dead for sure. So make sure you're backstepping or stopping those casts. And that brings us to Sadana Bloodfury. This boss is now fixed, so you do have to kill the ad. And basically what we do here, as a tank, I'm kind of clearing around this ring so we have some space. And you see Ranger back there, just we have space all around. Note as a tank, when she gets stacks of this, all her next auto attacks are going to deal big shadow damage. But careful when you're actually popping CDs to mitigate that, because as you can see here, now she's using Whispers of the Dark. I've already used my Spell Reflect to mitigate the first tick, and it'll mitigate the most of the ticks from this AoE, half the ticks I guess from this AoE. But then I'm not going to have anything up for the auto attacks, the shadow empowered auto attacks out of this. So just be aware, I have Demo Shout coming back up, so that's good timing there. But just be aware, those auto attacks, specifically on Tyrannical weeks, will hit extremely hard on the tank. So you want to make sure that you have mitigations available for whenever she gets that buff. So just watch her buffs, make sure you're aware when she actually gets this buff. And like, for example, you wouldn't be popping defensives here because she's channeling, but she's going to come back and immediately melee pretty hard. So I instantly Spell Reflect, because remember that incoming auto attack damage, I'm not able to spell reflect it back to it, right? I'm not doing it for the deflect. I'm doing it because it's a big magic DR, and it's pretty useful because it empowers your auto attacks with shadow damage. So be aware of that. Make sure you have something, because that's the biggest thing here for tanks. Otherwise, for healers, these whispers tick pretty hard once you get the higher tyrannical keys. And for everyone else, it's really just making sure that you're able to, one, make sure the ad doesn't get to Sadana herself, but also making sure it dies in time, because this can be a pretty tight DPS check, especially on these tyrannical keys. You know, we're using things like kidney to stop it, that kind of thing. But you want to make sure this ad gets blasted, right? We barely kill it in time there. So keep that in mind. Whispers into a 3-stack on the tank, for example, right? That does not hit lightly. I have Last Stand running. Still kind of hurts for sure. Note for these, you can stack in the same one here, of course. It's not individual person per. As long as you're staying in it the whole duration of the explosion, it doesn't matter if you're with someone or not. And that's pretty much this boss. Just kind of rinse and repeat from there. And as you see, we're just rotating around this ring here as we get more dagger spawns. That one was a pretty poor spawn there. Kind of eats into our room a lot. Ideally, they're closer towards the edges of the room like these previous spawns were, but it's not going to be the end of the world. Just be aware now that there's daggers in the middle of the room if you miss something like that. But anyways, let's move forward a bit here to the trash right after this boss. Where is it? Going. All right, there it is. Okay, so the key for this trash is actually to not use AoE interrupts or AoE stop, sorry, and interrupts. So the way these dominators work is they're channeling extra health into these subjugated soul mobs with this domination. But the key here means that these guys are no longer going to be casting any spells in these packs because they're busy channeling. And their Rending Void Lash ticks quite hard. Their random target channeled shadow damage. Plus, they do also have the domination they'll cast on players, which will need to be either interrupted or dispelled, that kind of thing. So what we do here is we actually only kick the one dominator out here to bring him into this pack, and then he'll come in, and then we only need to manage single target kicks on that one mob. Otherwise, we're just AoEing down here with priority damage actually going onto these two channeling dominators, because as you'll see when they die, the health of these subjugated souls that they're channeling into will decrease a bit there, because that domination channel gives them a big health boost. So that's why we do that. Way easier to manage kicks, right? If you had 3 of these mobs in this pull, you'd have to manage kicks on. It would just not be doable, right? So having only the one mob you need to kick, and then cleaving onto the other mobs that are channeling to reduce the health pool of these guys, very useful. Another note when pulling this exhumer, you always want to pull it when they're on top of each other. If you pull it up here, it'll spawn these two, and that becomes quite annoying. If you pull it over here, it only spawns these two because it's based on a range. I believe we just have someone actually step on that one. That's why that one procs. But no, like if you pull them when they're on top of each other down here at the bottom, you only get 2 of these spirits and they're right next to the pack instead of having 4 spirits and them being very far apart. So way easier if you pull this pack down here as opposed to pulling it when the exhumer is padded up near the ramp. So little note on this pull. Otherwise, we're just kicking the void bolts, and the death blast that spawn from these ads is kickable, but also stoppable. So you can just stun that and focus kicking on the void bolts, which target random players instead. Also, you can walk around here, up there, down, and avoid everything, and just go into the boss. Nhallish is a pretty easy boss. I would say definitely the kind of boss that gives you a breather in this dungeon for sure. Void Blast is a pretty short frontal cone. Be aware of that. Don't be in front by the tank. And then he's going to do a planner shift. Honestly, it doesn't really do a ton of damage. You probably don't want to stand in it still, but not the end. So you don't have to like immediately run out, but just get out before the end for sure. And you see I'm positioning back towards this way a little bit. That's going to be important for after this soul steal. I think ideally I actually could have moved even a little bit more, but I'll explain that in a second here. You have your soul. Note that when you kill your soul, you will actually get a damage buff when you come out. So if you have damage keys, you can save at least on pull and just pop here. And then immediately you see I run over here, summon that ad, and we just get that ad cleaved down because for some reason, no matter what, whenever you pull this pack over here, this ad gets spawned. So what we do is we just spawn it during the boss fight when we have our damage amp we just kick it in and we just cleave off the boss, and you know, it dies when it dies kind of thing. It's a pretty easy mob to deal with. No one's really worried. Everyone, like I said, damage amp right there. It's just expiring now, and then we're just nuking the boss here. Very, very simple boss fight. You know, if you can, like I said, save damage for after you come out of the spirit realm. In the spirit realm, I believe nature and holy damage is extra damage to that mob, so be aware of that as well. Maybe you can like a lot of like specs can actually just straight up one shot it or something like that, just because of the holy or nature damage amp. So use that to your advantage. Otherwise, pretty straightforward boss here. Moving into the next pack is the exact same as the first pull in this area. Sorry, too far. You've got two guys channeling domination, so you're actually cleaving them and prioritizing hitting them. I think, oh yeah, we had a meta stun go off on that guy, so that's the issue there. So be aware of that. Try not to CC these guys. So now we have to keep kicks on this guy. Luckily, the other mob in this pack is an Exhumer, so much less dangerous. You actually prioritize kicking those Rending Void Lashes way more than that Void Bolt. The Void Bolt is not too terribly difficult to deal with, and now we just have AoE stuns going out because we also trigger the next one. So be aware of that. Try not to do that. Definitely not recommended. But ideally, you handle this the exact same way as the first pull, where you don't kick these two guys here channeling. You focus them down so that their health increase on the other mobs goes away, and you just keep kicks on the one caster in the pack. Here, just watch the patrol. If the patrol was bad, if it was like over here, we would have shrouded to get past it. In that case, it was a good pat, so not a big deal. Come into pulls here, kicks on these corpse spiders. One melee kick is all it takes to cover every single corpse spider kick. Be aware of that. Otherwise, we have kicks and stops assigned to the plague bats. You can use either, like plague spits, like stuns there, right there. That stops the cast. Interrupts obviously will stop the cast, so be aware you don't need to necessarily kick them. Stops work as well. Very good for the 4 bat pack. Coming up, and then we move down and we end up doing a 4 spider kick, or 4 spider pull rather. Note though that doing said pull requires you to have access to either 4 melee kicks or a mage who's going to what's it called, the CDR his kick in this pull. So this is not a pull you're going to be able to do in every group, not a pull you're going to be doing in pugs for sure, because everyone needs to get their kick. But basically, we just pull all these corpse spiders in together. Everyone gets their kick. The mage CDRs his kick so that he has a melee CDR kick, basically, and is able to get his second kick. And then otherwise, everyone as a melee kick in this group is able to get their own kick. And boom, it's all dead. Pretty easy to handle. I think yeah, if one of these goes off on a 4 week, it's very rough for sure. It's definitely something you want to avoid. So definitely a more dangerous pull here. But if you have the kicks available to your group, like that's on a Tyrannical week, still pain, that one going off, but doable still. But on a 4 week for sure, that's exceptional pain. So you definitely want to make sure that you're getting those kicks. Maybe a pull you don't want to do depending on your group, depending on your kick makeup, 4 melee kicks or a mage and 3 melee kicks. Then we get to the worm here. We always bring in these bats when they patrol around, and this is basically one that we have AoE stops assigned to, and then each bat also has a single kick assigned to it at some point, but we're first prioritizing using those AoE stops right there. It's Shockwave, we've got Meta Stun going out, we've got Fears, we're going to have another Fear, I believe, after this as well. Basically just chaining AoE stops there. Oh, Dragon's Breath as well, and then probably a Fear. That kind of thing, just making our life easier, not needing to worry about interrupts. And then at some point, if we do need the interrupts, they're all marked, and we do have interrupts assigned to the bats if it's needed, but prioritizing chaining those AoE stops initially before actually committing kicks to that. Otherwise, we're just killing these worms. And honestly, at this Tyrannical level, you probably should be killing worms on this next boss here. It takes very little time, and it just makes the fight infinitely safer. They don't have a ton of extra HP comparatively on this kind of key level, and this fight is a slog, man. This fight is so long. The boss just has so much HP. It's kind of insane. Sorry, I back up a little bit. We do not commit Bloodlust to this boss fight. As you can see, it is available to use. We do not use it because the last boss is definitely much more difficult. This boss is just long. And if we were expecting this to go to key duration and we knew we'd get Lust up, we probably would lust on this boss, but given the current key level and how free this timer kind of is, we are not lusting on this boss. Going into the actual boss itself, right off the, oh sorry, it's too far, right off the pull here, you do want to have your range to make sure they come into the boss to bait puddles, and your buys, see both our range right there. You're gonna have the puddle come out in a second. Right after this corpse breath, there's a puddle. There it is. So it's baited in melee. So now all the melee can just stand in it and not be inhaled here in a second and still have boss uptime. Very, very important, because like I said, this is a very, very long boss fight. It's a slog for sure. So you want to have your melee DPS as high uptime wise as possible. And as you can see here, right, we're avoiding, and DPS are running out to finish off the other spawned worms there, because they are a bit of a pain for sure. They have very, very low health comparatively on this high of a Tyrannical key. Don't recommend getting inhaled there. The puddle was right beside me. Luckily, it doesn't really do too much. And now every inhale from this point on, the boss teleports away. If you have any bleeds on the boss, you can tell where the boss is going to spawn right there. The bleed numbers pop up. So I know. And note that now for any AoE effects, after the boss has moved initially, they are very difficult to hit. You have to get very, very close to the boss to actually hit things, like Thunderclap, for example. I just Thunderclapped. There's a perfect example, So I just Thunderclapped. You would have seen Rend reapply if it hit. You can see Thunderclap on cooldown, just a couple seconds. Rend is only 2 seconds left on the duration. You have to get right up against the edge of the mob here to actually hit Bone Maw with AoEs. That includes Ravager, Dragon's Roar, or Thunderous Roar, whatever it's called now. Thunderclap, like half of Prot Warrior's abilities, you need to get right up to the edge. And that's true for every single AoE class here, or class that has those kinds of AoE abilities. If you want to hit this boss mob after he's teleported away one time, you need to get right up in there. And it's very, very scary when he's inhaling as well. So be aware of that. That's kind of also partially the reason why this boss fight takes longer, because a lot of people don't realize they're doing like half the damage once he's done this teleport. See there, this is close enough to apply Rend with Thunderclap. This is how close you need to be actually be able to hit this mob. And ideally, this is where you'd be baiting as well. It's a close enough bait so I can still hit him with my other abilities here. But like even like Revenge isn't really hitting, right? So it's kind of very, very finicky with the boss's hitbox, unfortunately. But hopefully it gets addressed. But I don't know what the fix is for that. So unfortunate, but be aware of it. A little bit of counterplay sometimes, but kind of at the mercy of your baits for those puddles. But again, just see every time range is coming in here to get a good bait for melee, so that for the most part you can still be hitting this boss. But as you can see, very, very long boss fight for sure. But moving on, the trash pack after it. That's not the trash pack. There's Bone Maw dead. This is just a double spider, double bat pulse. Like I said, one melee kick on each spider, and then you can have kicks that you have left, or just stops on the bats. Either works there. Pretty simple pull, nothing really to talk about. But then we get to a pretty dangerous pull in the double void spawn pull at the top of the stairs here. So what I recommend here is to mark one of them and you focus that one down on fortified weeks. This could totally be a bloodlust, 100% justified bloodlust, especially on higher fort keys, because you just want to nuke one of these down ASAP to get rid of the double AoEs that they're doing. But on Tyrannical weeks, we definitely want to be lusting on the boss here. So we just hard focus this skull ad here to get it dead ASAP. All of our damage is going into it. You want to make sure you have cooldowns, available to you for this pull. Nuking that skull ad, definitely also an area when there's two up here to commit defensive cooldowns, to commit raid cooldowns if you have them available to you for these pulses. Particularly there, we got a raging pulse went off, definitely rough on the timing there, but as soon as one of these is dead, this pull just becomes infinitely easier. So now we're just kind of hard chilling. We popped like rogue cooldowns, we popped meta there, big CDs to get through this pull. Just to nuke one of them down instantly, and the pull gets a lot easier once you do that. So commit bloodlust here maybe on fortified weeks, but on Tyrannical weeks we do that just with cooldowns, and we end up lusting this boss. Now the way this boss works is that if you have a ranged DPS, it will always target the ranged DPS. So for our group, for example, we have 2 ranged. We have a healer and a mage. Every single one of these Omen of Death casts will target the mage guaranteed. Doesn't matter where the mage is, doesn't matter, mage will get targeted. If you had 2 ranged DPS, it would 50-50. It would be one of the 2 ranged DPS. Healers are excluded from being targeted from this if you have a ranged DPS. So keep that in mind. This fight actually is a kind of a weird fight in the sense that it actually gets way easier if you have a single ranged DPS, because that way that person can definitively bait every single one of these omens, and they know it's coming every single time. So as you see our mage here, the omen comes out, he instantly blinks. This omen pumps. This omen pumps, but a mage is lucky. They can blink every single one. So blink instantly. He dodges the first tick even. Most people, if you can't like instantly blink like that, you will eat the first tick. And this damage is fall off damage, right? So it's based on distance. You're always going to be taking some, like everyone out here, we're taking very low ticking damage, but we are still taking damage. So you're never going to take 0 damage from this. You can just mitigate it as much as you can by leaving and being far away from it. However, like I said, the person baiting it usually has to take 1 or 2 bigger ticks as they're moving out. So a mage is kind of OP for this, just because they have blink for every single one and they avoid that first tick. So keep that in mind. Try everyone else malevolence baiting. As you can see, we're trying to bait this not on top of the mage, just so he doesn't have to move more than he needs to. And also note that the original circle that he spawns each phase will despawn around the spawner, around the time that the Ritual of Bone starts. So keep that in mind. For us, we do prioritize killing one of these middle, like 3 or 4 ads here. The edge ads, you do have a little bit less space. They move a little later than the rest of the wall, but you do in general have less space to work with if you're playing on one of the edge ads. So I would recommend trying not to. We play this middle ad here. We do have that one omen directly behind us, like down here on the bottom right corner of the screen, a little bit off screen. But like I mentioned, we know that will despawn by the time this wall gets to it, so it's fine to pick this ad up. We're not going to pat directly into an omen, but keep that in mind too. The omen positioning kind of dictates which ad you're going to hit. If like the omen you just baited, for example, was like right here, we would not want to be hitting like these ads here. We'd want to be like one ad over like this guy. But if that's like the omen that you spawned initially in the phase, you know that's going to despawn, and so you're safe to pull these ones. You want to avoid the most recent omen. Keep that in mind as well. I'll try and show you. For Ner'zhul himself here, you want to bait off towards the sides a little bit for this malevolence, as you can see like we're doing now. So these malevolence will go off to the side, and now everyone can still be hitting. That's the perfect example right there. I'll rewind and show you again here. 22. So this is a bad bait here. This is an example of bad bait because we had the one person straight back, but now everyone is off to the sides of this wall, and we're able to cleave both. And there's that malevolence right off to the side. You barely even notice it because it's so much. There's so much overlap with the wall itself. Note on the wall now, by the way, there was a strategy for a while there where people would wait till the end and then gate through, or not gate through, just run through it, and then the debuff would disappear when the bone wall despawns. Not the case anymore. It like just ticks insanely ridiculously hard now at that point when the wall despawns, to the point where even like tanks are just insta dead to the dot if you ever get one tick. So be aware now, getting a single tick of this dot is a death sentence. Be very careful moving through this corridor here because if you like don't come at it at like right angles, like coming straight and then turning and moving out. Like if you try and cut this corner or cut this corner and you get a stack at the dot, you're dead. You're done. Finished for sure. So be very careful running through this. A pretty common strategy, I'll show you on the next wall actually, is making sure that you can have your ranged player stay and everyone else move through just for baiting the omen in a good spot. But otherwise, like I said, mage kind of owns at dealing with this omen. We're baiting the malevolence away from the mage so he doesn't have to move as much. I think he ran out of blink charges there because he blinked through previously. So another reason why you don't want to you want to have your range sit. So now we know that one's chilling. So it's kind of in a bad spot for this wall spawn in particular. So we move to the side here. Again, off to the side, trying to pull. You're going to see the malevolence come out, and we're able to still cleave both easily. And so that's why we position in that way. We kill this, the range will stay. Melee will run through, watch those stormings, pretty scary, and then the Omen immediately comes right over there on the edge of the room. Extremely, extremely good Omen spot. There we go. So over there, blinks. We need to move a little bit because that's like a little close to us. But again, the mage is able to just insta-blink and dodge the biggest hit of those ticks. Very, very good. And we have a lot of space in this room now based on that spawn and the positioning of those omens. And again, Malevolence right through there. Very, very good Malevolence. Still able to clear everything. Still able to cleave the entire time. And then, as I mentioned, kill this ritual, range stay. We run through as melee, and the bait comes like on the wall, and then he just blinks straight forward. Don't cut the edges there on the wall. Getting a dot is now a death sentence. No longer cheesable, so don't recommend doing that. That just about wraps up this dungeon, guys. Hopefully you did learn something, and if you did, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really does help. I want to give a big shout out to Gorebreaker and all of my other Patreon supporters. It does mean a lot, and if you want to support me over there as well, I'll link that down in the description below. You get great perks in my new Discord community, as well as your name at the end of every single YouTube video. So hopefully, if you guys want to, please do support me there. It really, really does mean a lot. Otherwise, just be sure to check me out over on my Twitch channel on Tactics. If you have any questions, ask me there. Ask me down in the comments over in my Discord. I'll do my best to answer wherever it is. And I'll see you guys in the next video.